Hey there! Welcome to Cheese Shop and to my simple woodworking series where I show you how to build basic projects. This one is a garden work stool, and it's perfect for the lower beds that you might be working in, vegetable beds. You need to harvest some lettuce. You can sit on this for a while and relax, take some pressure off your back and your knees. Very basic construction, and I think you'll find it very easy to build. The plans and the instructions are on my website. Just download the PDF there and you'll be able to follow it step by step. And let's just jump right into it. So first we're going to start off with our materials, and we've got some 1-inch thick decking and several pieces of 2x6. Now these are all scrap pieces that I have left over from other projects. So this project, the little stool, is a great way to use up some of that scrap. Now in addition to the wood, we're going to need 2 different size pocket hole screws, and I've got the 2.5 inch and the 1.5 inch. 2.5 inches for the 2x and the 1.5 inches for the 1x. And I'm going to have 2 different settings, obviously, with my jig and on my drill bits for those 2 different size screws. And of course, we'll need some adhesive to put these together. So I like to use just Tight Bond outdoor exterior glue. But you can also use something like Loctite or liquid nails. Now this first step might seem a little bit unorthodox because I'm going to be joining the end rails and the side rails together first. I'm doing this to really set up the holes for the screws for a later assembly, because I'm not putting these end rails and side rails together first when I do the final assembly. I'm going to be adding the end rails to the legs first, and then those assemblies to the top slats. Then I'm going to bring in the side rails and add it to there. Now it's a tight space, so that's why I'm going ahead and putting this together to set up those holes and basically as a guide. So when I do put it back together fully in the final assembly, it'll line up. You can see where I've changed the lineup of the pocket holes for the side rails and the end rails, so they do not line up. What can happen is if you line these up, obviously later on with the assemblies, you can have screws kind of crossing over each other, hitting each other. So I always try to make the spacing a little bit different. Here, it's obviously a little bit further away from the edge than it is over here. Okay, and now it's a matter of lining up side rails to the end rails, clamping them in place, and then attaching. Now remember, when you're doing this, you're not adding any sort of adhesive here yet, because this is just to position these holes and everything lined up. And one thing you'll need to check for too, and it's not so important here because the holes are all lined up the way they should be. Well, when you go to do the final assembly, make sure that the pocket holes that you've drilled that are going to attach the top slats are going in the same direction on the end rails and the side rails. Now we're adding the end rails to the legs after we took the end rail and side rail assembly apart. Now you see here I've got my holes that are for the 1.5 inch screws are going into the top slats. They're oriented in the same direction, so very key there. And you can see here are my holes when I had the end rails and the side rails attached. They're lined up over here as well. So now I'm just going to attach the side rail to the legs. Now this is where things can get a little tricky. This is a tight space here to be using the long square bit to drive in pocket hole screws. So what I've done is I've picked up a right angle attachment here, and this will allow me to get into a much tighter space and drive that screw in. We have a completed end rail and leg assembly. So now that I've got these end rail and leg assemblies together, I'm going to set them up on top of the top slats. Now line these up on the ends evenly. They all match up. Then I'm going to take our side rails and set these in and just get them all positioned together. So we know exactly where these rails need to go and how far apart the end assemblies are going to be. So now I've got basically a cohesive. So I use my plan as a guide, obviously, but in reality sometimes your measurements are going to be a little bit different than a standard board width will give you. So what I've done is I've measured across here to here, and then from here to here, figured out what the difference is, and then divide that by 2. That's going to give me my spacing from left to right. Same thing for front to back. And then I use my Craig multi-mark tool. I figure out what these differences are. I set my line on here, and then I just would set it up here and then use that as my guide. So now what I've done, I've taken my multi-mark and gone around and marked off all my corners on the top slats so that I know where to line up the edge and the corner of the end rail leg assembly. Now I've gone around and I've marked off exactly where this is going to be so I can come back and add my adhesive here. And after applying the adhesive, I've set this back in place. I'm going to attach the legs and the end rails to the top slats using 1.5 inch screws. And after you've finished attaching your legs and end rails to the top slats, you just slide your side rails into place. And then you can start attaching side rails to the end rails and then to the top slats. And there we have it. A nice heavy duty and sturdy stool for working in the garden. Well, I hope you found this video helpful, and make sure that you go to my website to download the plans for the exact dimensions and materials that you need for this and for other woodworking projects. And like I always like to say at the end of these videos, time to get off the computer or your mobile device and head out into the shop, make some sawdust.